welcome everybody to Intermediate Hebrew. This is week 5. The notes for this class and all past classes you can find at theregathering.com/page/PFT Hebrew 2. Hebrew 1 is my beginner class notes. You do have to have an account with the Regathering in order to access these notes. The account is free. Video recordings of past classes can be found on YouTube at the Passion For Truth video channel. So just search on there for Hebrew classes and you'll come up with that. There's also lots of other great videos on all sorts of topics on Passion For Truth video. So I encourage you to go there and learn what you can learn. All right, so last week we had our introduction to adjectives, and the notes from last week are sufficient to cover this week as well. So, as it says in the notes, there are two basic features governing the how adjectives function. The first is that an adjective always follows the noun that it describes. Okay? So if we have a word, say yom, which means day, and we wish to speak of a good day, we don't say tov yom. Good modifies day, so the adjective must come after the noun, yom tov. Okay, a good day. Similar with many other phrases you'll hear in Hebrew, boker tov, erev tov, lila tov. Okay, good morning, good evening, good night. But with any description of anything, if you were to say a blue car, in Hebrew the order of words would be car blue. Okay, I don't have the words in front of me in Hebrew for car or blue, but you get the idea. Yom tov. A good, a good fish, dog tov, all right. A good house, bayit tov. So, okay. Yeah, goodness, I suppose. Oh, dove, yes, dove is a bear, so a good bear would be dove tov. Oh, really? Nice. Good teacher, yes. Moreh is a teacher, so moreh tov would be a good teacher. Okay, so an adjective always follows the noun that it describes. Okay, so the second part, the second feature of adjectives is an adjective must always match the noun it describes in gender, number, and definiteness. Now, we talked about gender and number a little bit last week, but I'll go over it again. Okay, I'm actually going to have to erase that so I have room to give the examples, but this is printed out on the notes. Okay, so an adjective always matches the noun it describes in gender, number, and definiteness. So for a noun that is masculine and singular, such as bayit, which is house. Okay, bayit is a house. House is masculine. Bayit is masculine, and bayit means one house, so singular. If we're to say a big house, we use the masculine singular form of the adjective for big, which is gadol. Okay, so a big house is a bayit gadol. Okay, if we change the number of house, okay, and bayit has an irregular plural, which we covered before, but that is batim. Okay, so batim is houses. Right. So houses is still masculine, but it's now plural, so we need a plural masculine adjective to describe houses. And that is done by adding the masculine plural ending to the end of gadol. Okay, so this becomes batim gedolim, big houses. Okay, cherik yod mem, it's the same masculine plural ending that we put on a noun. We add it to an adjective to make it plural as well, and then it can modify a plural noun. All right, so that's for masculine words. Yes?
On house, bayit, and you took it over and you made it batim.
Yes.
What's the rule in there again? Because I'm looking at the B and the yod and the T, but I went over there, I went BT through the yod.
That's right. There's no rule about that. Bayit has an irregular plural form.
So just one of those you have to remember.
Yes, that's one you have to memorize. 99% of the time, you won't see that, but bayit is one of those words that has an irregular plural form. Okay, so I do usually try to give examples that don't use those irregular forms, but it's good to give those too, just so you know that they're there. But yes, that's where the yod went, is it just went. It just disappeared. Okay. Okay, so suppose we have a feminine noun, such as ayin, which is I. Okay. Ayin is I, and it is a feminine noun. Actually, that's a bad example, because ayin has a very irregular plural form. So I'm going to go with something else. How about a... yeah, I could do nephesh. I want something that's going to have a regular plural form. How about mitzvah? Okay, mitzvah. Mitzvah is a commandment. Okay, commandment. And it doesn't just have to be a commandment in the Torah, it can be a commandment from anybody. So as such, there can be good commandments and bad commandments. So it's not redundant to say good commandment. Okay, so mitzvah is feminine, and it's just one commandment, so it's singular. So good is tov, but tov is in the masculine singular form. So in order for tov to modify mitzvah, it has to be put in the feminine singular form. The feminine singular form is added by comets hey at the end of the word. Okay? So the comets hey is usually an indicator of femininity in a noun. So you simply add it to an adjective to make that adjective feminine. So a good commandment is a mitzvah tova. All right? Similarly, if we were to speak of a bad commandment, well, yeah, I won't give any examples, but there have been a few over the years, to be sure. The word for bad is ra, resh ayin, or wrong. Okay? But this is the masculine singular form of bad. To make it feminine singular, add comets hey. Mitzvah ra'ah. Okay, a bad commandment. All right, so that's the feminine singular. All right, suppose we were to speak of multiple commandments. Okay. Now, the feminine plural ending is ot, and mitzvah ends in a hey, so the hey drops off. So we drop the hey and replace with ot, making mitzvot, commandments. Okay, so if we're to say bad commandments, now we need the feminine plural form of wrong, which is done exactly the same way by adding cholam tav. Okay, ra'ot. So mitzvot ra'ot is bad commandments. Mitzvah ra'ah is a bad commandment. And if they were good commandments, we'd simply do the same thing to tov. Tov is good. We add cholam tav to make tovot. Okay, so good commandments would be mitzvot, tovot. Okay?
So the ra'ah and tovot, there's no sheva. Is that a rule that drops off, or I can see the ayin is silent as far as what I was.
Okay, are you talking about the...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm confusing the first word.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It didn't drop off. It wasn't there to start with.
Right, okay. Okay. So, masculine singular form for a masculine singular word, masculine plural form for masculine plural word, feminine singular form for a feminine singular word, and feminine plural form for a feminine plural word. Okay? Are there any questions about that, or do you want any more examples? Sometimes seeing and hearing more examples kind of solidifies it a little more. But the concept is pretty straightforward, but you can get lost a little bit when you start doing it. But you just have to remember that gender and number have to match. And I showed this last week as well, but
Gender is 1 to 1.
yes.
More than 1 to more than 1.
Right. Yeah, basically you'll add a suffix to the adjective depending on the gender and number. So here's masculine and feminine. Here's singular and plural. Okay, the adjectives I give will always be in the masculine singular form. So you'll see on your sheet there's tov, ra. This week I've actually added some more. I'll use some examples with our new words as well. Okay, so you don't add anything to a masculine singular. It stays exactly the way it is. Okay, to make an adjective feminine singular, add comets he. This goes for any adjective, anytime. Okay, regardless of the ending on the feminine noun, add the comets he to the adjective to make it feminine so it can describe that noun. Okay, so ayin, which is an I, it doesn't end in comets he, but you'll still add a comets he to any adjective that describes ayin. So a good eye or an evil eye, okay, these are phrases that are used in the New Testament. Okay, ayin is feminine and singular. So a good eye is not an ayin tov, but an ayin tova. Okay, it needs a feminine singular adjective. And similarly, a bad eye or an evil eye, which idiomatically means a stingy person, someone reluctant to give, who doesn't look on someone with compassion. Okay, instead of ayin ra, it'd be ayin ra'ah. Okay, so you've got to add that feminine ending to the adjective if you're dealing with a feminine noun. All right, if the noun is masculine and plural, add chirik yod mem, im, to the end of the adjective to make it match the noun. A lot of times there will be parity with that. Okay, good men, anashim tovim. Okay, good rivers, naharim tovim, or big rivers, naharim gadolim. Okay, small rivers, naharim katanim. All right, you'll hear that im repeated most of the time. But if there's an irregular, okay, so fathers, good fathers, Fathers has an irregular plural. Okay, it's not avim, but it is avot. But it still takes the masculine plural ending on the adjective because it's still a masculine plural word. Okay, so good fathers is avot tovim. So you'll lose that parity with some of the irregular forms. The important thing, though, is the gender and the number match. A lot of times the endings will match too, but not every time. Okay, and the feminine plural, cholam tav ot. Okay. And actually, I really shouldn't.
Is this just because, I mean, is this one of those things that you just have to learn and there's no reason or rhyme to it?
There's actually very good reason for it. The reason is that a lot of adjectives can also double in use as nouns. So the adjective tov, which means good, it can function also as a noun to mean goodness. Okay, similarly with gadol, which means big or great, gadol on its own can just mean greatness. Okay, it can function as, it can become an abstract noun, basically. And so so you'll notice sometimes that there will be, that adjectives are used in this form, and kind of the tip-off that they're being used in that form is that they don't match whatever noun they're coming after in gender or in number. When they do match, you know it's modifying the noun in front of it. When they don't match, you know you're going to a different thought, that these words are not connected. That's one of the main functions that gender has, is to connect words in a sentence together. So, we talked about this a little bit with verbs, and we'll talk about it a little more here in a minute. The subject of a sentence, the gender of the verb has to match the gender of the subject of the sentence. It's another way of keeping things clear, since the sentence structure is so fluid, knowing which verb goes with which subject.
So changing, like you said, as far as changing a thought, it's still the same concept. So they're not going to change the paragraph when they could change the paragraph.
It could in fact end a sentence or a paragraph right there between a noun and an adjective.
Okay.
And so yes, if it doesn't follow this, if you find an adjective after a noun, it does not match the gender or the number of the noun, you know you're dealing with two different thoughts. You know the adjective isn't modifying that noun. It's kind of like if we didn't have punctuation in English, if we didn't have periods or capital letters to indicate the beginnings of sentences. You could end a sentence with blue and start the next sentence with car, and in English it probably wouldn't be that unclear. But
the way we think is like 4 sentences create a paragraph. Okay? But when you're talking about scripture and you're talking about a different kind of thought, does that mean necessarily that in that context we're just kind of changing and going on to a different sentence, or could in the same paragraph there be a different thought?
Well, there can...
Because I heard people talk about how you're supposed to read the whole, I'm thinking God is so particular that he even goes to the finites of the letter and there's information, and yet he's so vast that you can take the whole scripture meaning. So what I'm trying to formulate in my mind is when you say that there's, it could change a thought, does that necessarily mean when you're reading it in Hebrew, in that paragraph, you could even have a whole thought change?
Yeah, I mean, mainly what I'm getting at is just is knowing that if you find within a section of text, okay, the word ayin, and after it you find tovah, you know that the sense, you know that these words are connected to each other. You know that this is talking about a good eye. Whereas if you found ayin and then a tov, all right, you know that ayin is feminine and you know that tov is in the masculine form. So you know that this isn't modifying ayin, so it must be applying to something else. It has to be functioning differently in the grammar than as a modifier for I. And actually this is, sometimes the difference is subtle, but it does shed some light on a few phrases. For example, the phrase Ruach HaKodesh, okay, which we translate as Holy Spirit. Ruach is a feminine noun. Okay, so if it was to be Holy Spirit, where holy is an adjective that modifies spirit, it shouldn't be Kodesh, because Kodesh is the masculine singular form. It should be the Ruach HaKadashah. But since it's Kodesh, it alters the meaning slightly to where it becomes the spirit of holiness. Okay, so Kodesh doesn't mean holy, it takes on the abstract form holiness, just like Tov can mean good or can mean goodness. It's not saying a spirit, right, it's not the spirit that's holy, it's a spirit of holiness. Just like you can have a spirit of wisdom, a spirit of counsel, spirit of might, okay?
So is that where in, and I've heard a teaching, where in the New Testament there's a difference between where it's capitalized, the little s, versus the Holy Spirit?
I don't know anything about that, so I can't speak to that.
Okay.
But yeah, that is the phrase, though, in Hebrew, is Ruach HaKodesh. Okay, but the rules of adjectives shed some light on the nuances of that phrase, you know. So Holy Spirit really isn't an accurate translation, because it's not saying that the Spirit itself is holy. It's saying it's a spirit of holiness. Just like the spirit of wisdom, it's not saying a spirit that itself is wise, but it's something that imparts wisdom. The spirit of holiness imparts holiness. It does other things too. Okay, you got to do a study on it to know exactly what it does, but just the phrase itself, the meaning of the phrase itself,
So when it is
has some nuances.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But when it says, as far as I'm going to send a helper, does that mean the Holy Spirit, or is that translated?
I think in context, yeah, it does mean the Holy Spirit.
That does mean the Holy Spirit.
The Spirit of holiness. I do prefer to say Spirit of holiness, just because it's technically a little more accurate. It's a nuance, you know, but anyway, that's
Grammatically incorrect.
yes. Strictly speaking, grammatically, it should be Spirit of holiness. But you know, does it affect how it functions? Not really. It's just a nuance of the phrase itself. You know, to know how it functions, you just study it out and see what it in fact does.
Each have the Holy Spirit.
Right. Right. But yes, so with any adjective that I give, you can use this chart. All right, or just know the rules. But this chart helps too. So if you're dealing with a feminine singular noun, use the feminine singular ending. A masculine plural noun, use the masculine plural ending, and so on and so forth. And this works for every adjective, every single time. Okay? No, go ahead. And okay, no problem. All right, no problem. Okay, so so the third part of the rule is that an adjective has to match the noun it modifies in definiteness. Now, what in the world does that mean? What that means is simply this. If a noun has the definite article attached to it, okay, so if we had Nahar Gadol, okay, Nahar is river, and Gadol is big, or great, or attached to river, we could even say long. Okay, so this is a big river. What if we're talking about a particular river? Ha-Nahar. Okay, the river. If we're speaking of Ha-Nahar, we have to use the definite article on the adjective that modifies it as well. Okay? So it's not Ha-Nahar Gadol, it's Ha-Nahar Ha-Gadol, the big river. Nahar Gadol, Ha-Nahar, Ha-Gadol.
Why the dagish in the noon? Nun.
Because of the rule with the definite article. The letter immediately following the definite article takes a dagish.
Thank you. Gotcha.
Okay? Yes, so this is a big river. This is the big river. And there's also another variant. You might ask, why does this have to be? Why do we need to attach the definite article? Because without the definite article, this would actually be, instead of a phrase, the big river, it would be a sentence. So if we had, if we had Ha-Nahar Gadol, instead of this meaning the big river, it's a statement that the river is big.
It's judgment call about any river.
Okay? So that's a complete sentence. It's got a subject and the verb, which is the invisible word is. All right, whereas either of these phrases are not sentences in and of themselves, and we would need more words to make a complete sentence.
And the difference between...
Okay, the difference is whether we have the definite article attached to the adjective or not.
The river is big, would be the Illinois River, but the big river would be the Mississippi.
Right, yeah. If there were no other context around it, usually the syntax would be that we talk about something and then later on when we refer to it in the definite, just saying the man. This is done in Genesis, by the way, with Adam. Gives his name, but then later it's talking about the man. Well, which man's it talking about? Well, the only man that was mentioned before, Adam. That's what man is talking about. Okay, so yes, if we were talking about the Mississippi River and later we said the big river, well, we know what river we're talking about. Okay. So yes, but in order to say the big river, we've got to affix that definite article to the adjective as well as to the noun. Okay? Which, by the way, is another reason that Ruach HaKodesh, it would be HaRuach HaKodesh, and actually it would be HaRuach HaKadashah if it was to be the Holy Spirit. And why is it Ruach HaKodesh? Well, that's a subject for another time, because what happens when you have the definite article only on what seems to be an adjective? Okay, that's part of what they call a compound phrase or a construct phrase. Okay.
If the definite article is Adam, then when we refer it again, and then it could be just a man.
The man, yeah. Now, incidentally, Adam's name is Adam, and when it refers to him later, it's Ha-Adam. Okay, using Adam as the word for man. Okay, so it's not necessarily saying the Adam. It's speaking of the man. Okay, so in that case, there's that sort of pun, with his name meaning man, and then later saying the man. But you won't find, David isn't referred to as the David anywhere. Okay, it's
so
just
once it's done that in a paragraph, in a chapter, it will refer. There will be only like once that it's referred to.
Oh no, not necessarily. No, you can. I'm just saying with the definite article.
Okay.
He was speaking of the difference between just any big river and the big river. But it's not always, just because you have the definite article in front of something doesn't mean you're referring to something that everybody's going to know what it is. It just means you're specifying. You're talking about a particular big river, not just any big river. Okay. Now, whether that's described it, yeah, right.
Well, when it talks about the Nile River, or it talks about crossing the Red Sea, and if it were to refer it to again, it may call it.
Well,
and
yeah.
it may not.
Yeah, I mean, it could. It's the same. It's the same thing we do with English. It's not correct to use a general pronoun the first time you refer to somebody, because who's he? Who's she? It makes for very unclear writing. But yeah, that's one way it can function, is in, to refer to something that was referred to before. But it's also in any way that we can use the English word the, we can also use the hey prefix.
Okay.
The evil one.
Right, yeah. Now that is one case where ha-satan, okay, the adversary, that is one case where it's used without any prior referent. Right, when it says the adversary, sometimes it's very clear. It's not just referring to what, that there's nobody prior referred to like that. So you're going, okay, the adversaries, like which adversary? So then get some hints into that whole side of things. So that's one case where, yes, it's like, but there's other times where you just see Satan on its own, an adversary. Yeah, just an adversary. And a lot of times when you see that, it's actually referring to a human being.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yes, many. Yes, Satan, because it's not his name. Okay, people, they capitalize the S. Right, there's not, he's just referred to as the adversary. So, now, okay, so, yes, so the adjective must match the noun in definiteness. A definite noun needs a definite adjective. We would literally translate this, the river, the big, okay, but that's not what it's actually doing. It's just telling you that it belongs with river, okay? So, all right, so now let's extend some sentences a little bit, because we can get a little more complicated with our adjectives. All right, so let's take Adam, okay, a man named Adam, or actually, let's not do Adam. Let's do Ish. Let's just do a general man. Okay, so Ish is a man. If we wish to say that a man is coming, there's two ways we can do it. We could say Ba Ish or Ish Ba. Either one means a man is coming. Okay? Now, suppose we wish to say that a good man is coming. Right, ba, ish, tov. The adjective must follow the noun that it describes. Right, or it can become ish, tov, ba. Okay, either one of these would mean a good man is coming. Okay. If we wish to say that the good man is coming, okay, we would need, right, ba, ha-ish, the man, Hatov. Okay. The good man is coming. I'm kind of running my letters together a little there, but you can kind of see the break. Okay.
When you're talking about, and maybe it's not, I don't know, it's where my brain goes, okay? So, when he's talking about in Paul, the first Adam, and last Adam, is there a direct article in there, and to reference the difference between the two?
You're saying in the actual text that's talking about the two Adams?
Yeah.
It would be in Greek, so I don't know.
Would be, okay. Not be.
Yeah, well, I mean, who knows what language Paul originally wrote his letters in? But what we've got is Greek. So, Yeah, I'm sure it would have the Greek definite article in there for the first and the second. But I'm not a Greek expert by any means.
No, I mean,
so
I didn't know, but I as far as there are some writings though that are New Testament or New that are in Hebrew.
there is definitely a Hebrew Matthew, and the big question surrounding that is that a back translation? Do they just take the Greek Matthew and translate it into Hebrew, or is this Hebrew Matthew a copy of a copy of a copy of an original Hebrew text? Okay, because it actually dates back to, I think, like around 1000 A.D. that this copy was written, and so that's the question: is it's called the Shem Tov Hebrew Matthew because it was written by a rabbi actually by the name of Shem Tov, and yeah, it's great. Yeah, good name. So yeah, that's his legacy among among Christians anyway now is that he penned this Hebrew Matthew. Apparently he had it so that he could debate with Catholics. So he'd have a copy of the New Testament in Hebrew that he could use to make his arguments around. But anyway, so the question is, well, did Shem Tov have access to another Hebrew Matthew and he just made a copy of it, or did he take the Greek and translate it into Hebrew to have a Hebrew copy? That's the big question surrounding that, and there are indicators on both sides. Actually, there's right. Nehemiah Gordon has a great exposition on that. He has a whole book dedicated to it actually, and I've actually I've seen, my parents had a copy of the Hebrew text of the Shem Tov Hebrew Matthew, and it was very interesting. But yeah, like there's evidence on both sides because there are Hebrew word plays in it. Well, you'll find once you start reading through the Torah and the Tanakh that there's puns all over the place. There are a lot of words that sound very similar and even come from the same root, and those will be juxtaposed with each other all the time in order to give emphasis or just to draw attention to different things, or even to aid memory. They do aid memory. Like Adam, the first man, came from the Adamah, the soil. Okay, and the two words are come from the same root, which means red. Okay, so I mean I'm not red. I'm quite white. But people from the Middle East kind of take on a more reddish tinge. Native Americans were more red, so it's thought that originally man kind of had that more reddish tone. And the ground is, red, although, well, Missouri it is some places. It's got the red clay.
What's the word for blood?
The word for blood is dam, which is also related to Adam and Adamah, and blood is, of course, red. Yes. So anyway, there's a lot of those kinds of word plays, and so I'm way off topic, but it's okay. The Hebrew Matthew has those word plays in it. So the question is, why in the world would a rabbi insert these word plays back translating from Greek? Like, what incentive does he have to do that?
So a Jewish Bible that has New Testament, Old Testament is taking.
I don't know.
It's taking Greek version and.
If you did find a version today that had the New Testament in Hebrew, it would be a translation from the Greek.
Okay.
Because, to my knowledge, they have not found original Hebrew manuscripts. There's also what they call the Aramaic New Testament, which is like the Peshitta. I'm not real well studied on that, so I couldn't tell you much about that. I actually have a lot of questions about that, like, are those original texts? Like, where did that Aramaic come from? But
it's supposed to be that the students are taught and they memorize the text, and at one point it was written down.
Right.
Then at that time they were speaking Aramaic.
Right.
Supposedly it was penned in Aramaic.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of research on that myself. I'm a little skeptical, honestly. But it would be awesome, because I've always wanted to. It's always a difficulty when you're doing word studies. You can track a word all the way through the Old Testament, And then you hit the New Testament, and you go, okay, now which Greek word do I transition to so I can incorporate New Testament scriptures to relate to Old Testament ones? You know, if I'm looking up grace, how do I know that the grace in the New Testament is the same as the grace in the Old Testament? Because it's one's in Hebrew and one's in Greek. So it's, you know, and right. It's so how do I know I'm tracking the same concept? You know, what if the concept I'm tracking in the Old Testament is mercy, and then I get to grace in the New Testament and I'm getting my wires crossed, you know, confusing these concepts together, or, you know, so that was always a frustration of mine, going between, you know, the Greek and the Hebrew. So it'd be awesome if there was a Hebrew New Testament. It so happens, yeah, now one thing that can be done is, since there is a Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint, you can track the same Greek word through all the way. But you don't know 100% if the writers of the New Testament were using Greek words that corresponded to the Septuagint translation. Okay, there could be some leeway in which word they used for what. So anyway, there's always challenges every step of the way. But anyway, so back to our sentences and adjectives. And just to make sure the concept's sinking in, I'll give some examples here. Okay, makom is a place. And this can be any place, just a location. Yeah, Illinois could be a makom, or over there could be a makom, or, you know, on top of a hill could be a makom. Okay, makom is masculine and singular. All right, so how do we say a clean place? Makom tahor, yes. Yes, a clean place. In fact, you'll find this phrase in the chapter describing the red heifer sacrifice, because this is where the remains of the sacrifice were to be taken, was to a clean place, a makom tahor. Okay? How about an unclean place? Makom tameh. Right. And just a quick comment on these words, tahor and tameh. They're usually translated clean and unclean. And they can basically be used in that sense. But the meanings of these words do go a little bit beyond that. Tahor really means pure, as opposed to clean, because when it talks about the gold that's used in the tabernacle, it is zahav is gold. It's zahav tahor. Okay, it's not clean gold; it's pure gold. Okay. And tameh, unclean, is usually a pretty decent translation of it, but as opposed to pure, just one substance, tameh means mixed, a mixture of substances, right? Or defiled, yes. And so that's some of the concept behind clean and unclean, is things being pure or things being mixed. And tameh doesn't necessarily mean evil, but as concerns entering the temple grounds, of course. Tahor is necessary, purity is necessary. Okay, so
lots of places unclean, is it always unclean?
No, unclean places can be cleansed. And unclean people can be cleansed. And most of the book of Leviticus kind of deals with those situations. Yes, hallelujah for that. Usually the transition from tameh to tahor is done via water, done by mayim, yes. He shall wash his clothes, and then at evening he shall be clean. Okay, very common phrase.
That's in this context where you're talking about the heifer, is as far as cleansing, it would be with water.
I think in Jim's teaching on the red heifer, he elaborates a little further on what this clean place is. Because this phrase on its own, like I said, it could mean any place that's clean. But I think in the context of the setting historically, they knew what the clean place was. It was a specific location. Right, and see, there are things that can make a place unclean, like having a grave there or a dead body will make a place unclean. And so for it to make sure it's a clean place, it'd have to be a place that's protected. And so they make sure, those, right, that those things are not present. So they would need to specify, to pick a specific place in order for this to work. They can't just know, oh, okay, this looks like a clean place, Okay, but this would be the proper way to use the adjective with these this noun. And of course, if we were to refer to a feminine noun, okay, so how about a clean eye or a pure eye? I'm not sure if that's really a phrase, but we can use it just for the sake of illustration. Okay, so ayin is a feminine singular noun. Tahora, exactly. Add the feminine singular ending. Okay, and likewise, clean places would be makomim, tahorim, okay, and so on. All right, so I think you get the idea. These endings apply to all adjectives.
Is it tamea?
It would be tamea, yes. It to be to feminine, unclean. In fact, you'll see that phrase a number of times. Okay. So are there any other questions about adjectives? Adjectives are very difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. Because, in English we don't have these particularities with them. Blue is blue is blue. We don't change blue, based on the gender or number, because there is no gender in English, and blue cars makes no difference, but in Hebrew it does make a difference. So a lot of people struggle with adjectives, so I want to make sure that that's all kind of coming through clear.
How do you transfer over to the gender concept? Because I'm still having the mindset.
She's a good waitress, he's a good waiter.
Right.
We keep gender together.
Gender in Hebrew is it's a just so thing. If you could imagine a language in which, I only have red and black on me, but in which all words were either red or black. Okay, so we wrote a sentence, we talked about the dog chased, and all of a sudden we transitioned to red. Okay, the cat.
So that means it's a female cat?
Well, what it would mean is that cat is a red word in this imaginary language, okay? Every time you see the word cat, it's written in red.
Okay.
And every time you see the word dog, it's written in black. Okay, and so then if we were to say that this is a big cat and a small dog, or a brave cat and now all of a sudden chased is red and dog is black. Dog is still black, cat is still red, because you can't. The idea here is that you can't change the color. Okay, colors corresponding to gender. You can't change the color of a noun. Okay, if a cat's red, a cat's always red. And if a dog's black, a dog's always black. But what you can change is verbs and adjectives. Okay. So big is black when it's referring to dog, but it's red when it's referring to cat. Okay? So that's kind of how gender functions in Hebrew. Every noun is either masculine or it's feminine. Okay? But verbs and adjectives change to accommodate the nouns that they're dealing with. I'm kind of staying in front of my other example here. But yeah, that's basically how gender functions. So it's an intrinsic property, okay? It's an unchangeable property of nouns. But adjectives and verbs, change gender in order to accommodate the nouns that they're modifying. If we were to further expand this language to where we could write something like this. Right. Now we're getting closer to what Hebrew looks like. Because since chased is black, we know that it's the dog doing the chasing. Okay, because it's matching, this is telling us the subject. Okay.
So we're doing it back.
Right. So, I mean, like I said, this is an imaginary language. This isn't, it's kind of an approximation of what Hebrew is like. But this is kind of how gender functions. Is think of it just it's not so much that something's male or female. Those are just kind of the terms that are attached. But so I like color as an example because color is neutral. There's no reason that something's blue instead of red instead of green. But if you think of everything as being either one color or another, and that these adjectives and verbs change color, change gender to give clarity to the sentence, that's kind of how gender functions. In Hebrew, it's a little more difficult than some other languages too. But once you kind of get accustomed to it, and especially once you really see the endings over and over, you see that comet's hay ending and you go, okay, feminine. You see eem and you go, okay, masculine plural. You see oat, feminine plural. You'll really kind of get in the swing of that. And then it's the only hurdle after that, once you get real accustomed to that, is just memorizing the irregularities, of which there are actually very few. So yes, it does take some getting used to, because there's lots of languages that have gender as a property. But English just is not one of them anymore. It used to be. A long time ago, Old English had gender, but it's gone now. And so now for clarity, we rely on order of words. Word order is paramount, word order and punctuation.
Right, because there's like a direct noun, but you have those things.
Right, in English there's no necessity for a direct object preposition, because you always know the direct object. It's the word that immediately follows the verb. No question, But in Hebrew, there's that fluidity with the language. Okay, and so Hebrew, what it allows Hebrew to do is have many shades of meaning with just a few words, whereas in English, we can express a lot of different ideas, but we do so with a broad vocabulary. Okay, we have lots of words that can mean big, great and large and extravagant, and we can have little shades of meaning that go with that. Hebrew does the same thing, but it does so with word order, repeating words. It does so with a much smaller vocabulary.
Are you going to see that more throughout the Old Testament? But would you see the difference in meaning a lot throughout the Psalms and Proverbs?
Proverbs probably not so much, because the Proverbs kind of follow a set pattern. There's kind of a proverb structure. You can even see it in the English when you read Proverbs. It's kind of like, you can kind of identify it. In the Hebrew, it's really, really, really obvious. It's like, okay, this is how a proverb is structured. Psalms you will see a lot of, especially because they're sung. You'll see a lot of those nuances in there. Okay, this word's being emphasized, or this phrase is being repeated. Okay, His mercy endures forever. So you'll see a lot of that kind of poetic side in the Psalms. You'll also see it in the prophets. In fact, the prophets might be even more than the Psalms, because the prophets are very poetic in their expression. So I think that we are probably... we got a little time left. So, all right, are there any other questions about adjectives? I know the gender thing is a bit of a hang-up, but as you keep using it, it just kind of becomes second nature. That is basically the function. And like I say, adjectives are a big stumbling block. So that's why I dedicated 2 classes to it. Okay, well, if there's no further questions, then thanks for coming, and we'll see you next week. Shalom.